And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I don't know. He's too heavy. So I said to my son, we're getting him out. I won't tell you how we got him out, by hook or by crook. We got him out and landed him on the pontoon. And she was very thankful. And I said, over to you, or do you want some help or guidance? I wanted that skipper, that leader, to take charge of their own destiny. And she couldn't. She was just, obviously not as experienced as one would like to think. So I said, right. So I took over. I said, right, what you need to do is do this. Get him on the boat, phone for an ambulance, because there's no way you should let him, how long has he been in there? How much water has he drunk out of the marina, et cetera, and please just get him to hospital, whether it's by car or by ambulance, get him there for a checkup. The following morning, they decided not to race, strangely. And she said, thank you very much for last night. He ended up having at least a broken collarbone. As to whether that happened on the way in water or on the way out with my son and myself getting him out of that freezing water, to me is irrelevant. The fact is he didn't drown. But it's such a shame that this is a race crew, which is, should be more experienced than the basic cruising people sometimes. And that skipper fails to deliver that leader.
What advice would you give to skippers then on the best way to lead a crisis situation?
Right. Let's go back to sort of a man overboard scenario. So, Neil, we've done, the idea is to do as many exercises in controlled conditions, is the standard sort of phrase, before, as insurance, in case something nasty happens, like a person falling overboard. So we practice man overboard maneuvers, drills, exercises in using engines or sails, and then how do we get that person back under controlled conditions, I hope, so that we can say, oh, well, what if this goes wrong? What can we do? Because we can't do that. So we're increasing our knowledge, our experiences of saying, well, let's use that. And whether you're a crew member or the leader, you're learning these experiences and getting what I call more tools in your tool bag. Yeah. Hopefully you pull out the right tool. But it's so we try and exercise, all sorts of maneuvers, hopefully slightly hopefully under control conditions, and then push the boundaries a little bit to say, what if this happens? What can we do to counteract that? So again, the leadership is saying, come on, let's go out and, okay, let's go to Bournemouth, but on the way, can we just have a little play and throw a fender in the water and try and recover it?
So you do a bit of rehearsal. So you do as much muscle memory as possible, as much rehearsal as possible. But let's say you're in a crisis situation. What's the best advice for leadership, for the skipper as a leader in that situation when it happens?
Thank you. Yeah, as soon as that leader can, the leader should get away physically, as in manually, away from that situation if they can, to take charge of the whole boat, whether it's 10 meters or 15 meters of boat, to stand back and say, Neil, can you do that? Albert, can you do that? And again, try and be a little bit patient. Speed may be of the essence, but try and, again, come back to this calm thing. Yeah. Neil, do this. And Neil knows that I hardly ever say please in that sort of environment. I just say, Neil, pull that. Albert, steer to port. I don't extend the sentence to please. So I don't even need to say now, because when I've said it, it does mean now. And that's my leadership technique, is that people, I need to advise people that, excuse me, I'm not saying please because I'm not courteous, or I don't say now. It's because these things need to happen. So standing back in a situation that you didn't want, the leader should still try and stand back without getting their hands on to see the whole situation.
Okay. That thing about not saying please is a good example. Neil and I did a recording about bullying, and we talked about the fact that certain language, certain style of communication is acceptable in different environments, but one might not transfer to the other, right? So clearly in a conference room, in a meeting, it might not be acceptable that you don't say please and thank you. Yeah. It's completely acceptable in your world because it's about get the task done, right?
Yes, good point. And when I'm starting to teach newcomers, I'm more than likely will say please, and then I transfer that once they gain experience. I'll say, I'll probably drop my pleases when I think I need something done a little bit faster. So again, I'm sort of teaching them my mannerisms, as you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that leadership message there is, and this would apply to any situation, because it could apply in business as well when something is happening, is take a step back so you can see the whole picture and then make decisions on what needs doing. And I think and then communicate those decisions really clearly and directly. So that kind of sounds like 3 steps. So stand back, decide what you're going to do, then communicate clearly and effectively, and then see if it's working. And if it's not working, make another decision.
So Neil, for our audience,
there's
no reason why that doesn't apply in any leadership situation.
Correct.
Any leadership situation.
The key thing is don't jump in and take over yourself, because if you're doing it, you're not leading it.
Yeah.
I think is the message there. Yeah. So I've got one more main question. Sorry, Adrian, were you just going to say something then?
No, it's a very good point you've just made.
Okay, so I just one more question I want to ask, kind of, and then we'll go into a few quick fire questions. So on a boat, it's a close confined, so you're doing overnight, you're sleeping, odd hours and stuff like that. And whatever size boat it is, whether it's a small boat or a big boat, how do you, as a leader, how do you manage conflict situations amongst the crew?
Yes, well, there's a big space of water that you could push them into, but that's not nice.
It's a technique, right?
It's a technique, not to be not to be promoted. Yeah, it's and I've had quite a few conflicts. I think in a small environment, so you're locked in, a boat of whatever size, you're locked in, and you can't just literally walk off the boat and swim to that Caribbean island. So it's, again, the leadership is just to let the crew within reason do what they feel like, under education, that they're not doing things wrong in the sailing environment, that if one person just doesn't get on with the other eventually, to me, on something like a boat, the leader needs to step in quietly and early to the individuals separately.
Okay.
Then hopefully he's nailed it straight away in most circumstances, and just say, look guys, you can't do this on this boat. Maybe have a chat about it in the pub when we get to the other end, but we can't have this conflict, and if you've got any problems, I'm the leader, you have a problem with me rather than the problem amongst yourselves. So the leader should take the flak.
Okay. Yeah, and it sounds like you've got to judge where do you need to step in, because I guess there's some situations where they'll just sort it out amongst themselves, and there's other times where if you don't step in, you're probably creating a bigger problem by kind of turning a blind eye to something you should have dealt with.
Yeah, and I've heard of a few stories about other leaders, other skippers turning a blind eye, and it escalates.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about if you're on a long trip, like overnight or something, and you notice that a couple of crew members aren't getting on with each other. Well, there's nothing wrong with the skipper, the leader, saying, Neil, can you go in with that other crew, with that other watch? Albert, you stay where you are. And and you don't have to go public, and just say, Neil, I think you'll be better off going over there because of. So you can, you don't have to enhance the conflict. The leader should be able to make a suggestion, if possible. How about, Neil, you working over there, Albert working over there, as one example. And that's happened. I wasn't the skipper of a boat, but the skipper, it was a 12 crew boat, and the skipper realized there was a conflict many years ago, and he put it a bit more bluntly than me, but basically he split up 2 people into 2 different watches. So most of the time they weren't beside each other. They may have to talk to each other to change over the watches through the night. Yeah. But he deflected that situation.
Interesting. That's good. That's great. Thank you for that, Adrian. So let's do a few quick fire questions to finish with. Albert, you do one first, and then I'll pick one, and we'll do two or three.
Okay, this has been really good for me because this is not an environment that I know very well. So you guys obviously are a bit more comfortable with it. But from a role model perspective, who would you take as a role model to do what you do well?
That is a very good question. Strangely, Tom Cunliffe, who is a fellow Yachtmaster Ocean Examiner instructor, he was quite a harsh instructor in his early days, but I can still learn a lot from him, and he's such a calming influence because he knows everything.
Yeah.
And so on a similar lines, is there a book that you would recommend on leadership in sailing or boating that you would recommend to skippers to read?
Unfortunately, I can't, because I can't think of a book that says this is how you lead in this situation, this is how you lead in another situation. That's a very good question, and I might just have to write a book.
So Adrian, we should have a chat about that, and let's see if we can do that. I think
there's an opportunity for you there.
Okay, go on.
Let's think, as our audience are leaving this and they want to remember Adrian Thornton being on here, either a quote that you've heard that you'd like to leave them with, or a quote that you'd like to just contribute.
Let's say, well, one quote I mentioned earlier: the art of leadership is delegation. I've had that for 30, 40 years. Then prepare, or experience, prepare, delegate, and stay calm.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So that's the 4 tips. There you go. There's 4 chapters of the book already.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask a bit of a fun question, but actually there's a little seriousness to it as well. So, do you ever watch Below Deck on television?
No, I don't. But go on.
But so Below Deck is about super yacht crews, and so skippering super yachts. Is there a difference in leadership when you're skippering a super yacht and you've got a load of rich paying guests on board, and you're managing your deck crew and your interior crew? Do you think there's a difference in leadership in that?
Yes, there is, because you could say that I'm the face. As a chief instructor of a sailing school, I'm the face rather than the administration. So I need to look pretty. I'm still working on that. And all those things, but so I've got to instruct and make everybody safe. A skipper a leader of a super yacht, they've got to look after their crew and then turn the PR sparkle to the people who are chartering the boat. And I know quite a few delivery skippers and super yacht skippers. It's strange that I don't bother watching Below Deck. Yes, there are 2 slightly different trains there. That the leader is looking after his ship and his crew, but then they still have to be able to do the PR bit. Yeah. But that, in a sense, you could say that's not leadership. That's just PR.
Yeah. So the leadership is the safety of the boat and the crew, and then there's a face, as you say. I guess it's a bit like in business. The CEO has to make sure the business runs, but he has to have a face to his customers as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so Albert, was there any other questions you wanted to ask?
No, I think we've had a really good session. It was really interesting, and especially seeing as this is not a world that I'm used to, other than Neil taking me sailing. But it sounds like I've got a lot to learn before I could get to the next level. But from leadership lessons, again, there's a very close connection to the previous guests we've had from lots of different worlds. But there's also lots of uniques in here that hopefully is valuable to your audience as well.
Adrian. Yeah.
It should be. Yeah.
Adrian, any final words from you?
No, I think that's good. It's just it is a shame. It's a very good point. It's a shame there isn't a book that you can read on leadership in sailing. That you've got to go out there and go through numerous hurdles up the chain and sideways to gain that leadership. It's some people are natural leaders. Some people don't like it, but sailing boat skippers must gain